Something massive just happened in the global energy market. After nearly 6 decades of membership, the United Arab Emirates has officially left OPEC and OPEC Plus, a decision that has sent shockwaves through the oil industry and raised serious questions about the future of the world's most powerful oil alliance. The UAE was not just another member, it was OPEC's third largest producer and one of the group's most influential countries. But here's where things get even more dramatic. This decision comes at a time when the Middle East is facing one of its most volatile periods in years. Rising regional tensions, growing uncertainty around the Strait of Hormuz, and increasing concerns about global energy supplies. All of this has created an environment where every major oil-producing nation is reassessing its strategy. So why did the UAE decide to walk away from OPEC now? What does this mean for oil prices, for global markets, and for the balance of power in the Middle East? And perhaps the biggest question of all, could this be the first crack in the foundation of OPEC itself? Let's break it all down. To understand why the UAE decision matters so much, we first need to look at what's happening inside the country right now. The United Arab Emirates is facing one of the most serious security challenges in its modern history. Over the past months, the country has been caught in the middle of rapidly escalating regional conflict involving Iran and several Gulf states. Iranian missiles and drone attacks have targeted locations across Gulf region, and the UAE has not been immune. Emirati authorities have repeatedly accused Iran of launching attacks against civilian infrastructure and strategic facilities. Air defense system across the country has been placed on high alert. Security measures have been strengthened, and critical infrastructure is now operating under increased protection. One of the biggest concerns in the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which a significant share of the world's oil export passes every day. Any disruption in the region has the potential to impact global energy supplies almost immediately. The conflict has also increased uncertainty across financial and energy markets. Investors are closely watching every new development because even a single attack can send oil prices sharply higher. Despite the growing tensions, the UAE has worked to maintain stability at home. Airports remain operational, business activity continues, and the government is actively reassuring investors and residents that the country remains secure. But behind the scene, leaders in Abu Dhabi are being forced to rethink their long-term economic and energy strategy. And it is against this backdrop of regional instability, security concerns, and shifting geopolitical alliance that the UAE made a decision that shocked the oil world to leave OPEC. So why would one of OPEC's most important members decide to walk away after nearly 60 years? The answer comes down to one word: control. For years, the UAE has invested billions of dollars into expanding its oil production capacity. The country wanted to increase output, export more oil, and strengthen its position as one of the world's leading energy producers. But there was a problem. OPEC's production quotas limited how much oil member countries could pump. In other words, the UAE had the ability to produce more oil, but under OPEC rules, it could not fully use that capacity. This created growing frustration inside the country's leadership, especially as global energy markets become increasingly competitive. The UAE was investing heavily in new oil fields, modern infrastructure, and advanced production technologies, yet many of those investments could not deliver their full potential while production remained restricted. At the same time, the country's economic ambitions were growing. Abu Dhabi has been pursuing an aggressive strategy to attract investment, expand its influence, and diversify its economy beyond oil, but oil revenues still play a critical role in funding those ambitions, and producing more oil means generating more revenue revenue, there were also a broader geopolitical calculations the UAE has increasingly sought to pursue an independent foreign and economic policy, one that is driven first and foremost by its own national interests rather than by the collective priorities of a larger organization. Leaving OPEC gives the country greater flexibility, greater freedom over production decisions, and greater control over how it responds to changing market conditions. Supporters of the move argue that it allows the UAE to maximize the value of its energy resources. Critics, however, warn that acting outside of OPEC could contribute to greater volatility in global oil markets. Either way, the decision marks a major shift, not only for the UAE, but for the entire structure of the global oil industry, because when one OPEC's most influential members decides it no longer needs the organization, the rest of the world starts asking whether others might eventually follow. What are global media saying right now? While the UAE's decision to leave OPEC is dominating energy headlines, global media outlets are also focused on the growing tensions between the UAE and Iran. According to Reuters, UAE authorities have accused Iran of resuming attacks against the Emirates despite previous ceasefire efforts. The UAE government stated that its security and defense partnerships are a purely sovereign matter and warned that it reserves the right to respond to any threat against the country. Reuters also reported that Iran's strikes have targeted civilian infrastructure and energy facilities inside the UAE more than in several neighboring Gulf states. The report notes that Abu Dhabi has responded by strengthening cooperation with both the United States and Israel while pushing for a tougher stance towards Tehran. Euronews recently quoted senior UAE advisor Anwar Gargash, warning that instability around the Strait of Hormuz represented a serious risk not only for the Gulf region but also for Europe and the wider global economy. Gargash emphasized that Gulf states have worked hard to avoid direct conflict, but acknowledged that the war has created multiple secondary crises across the region. Al Jazeera reported that tensions escalated after renewed incidents involving ships and military forces around the Strait of Hormuz. The network described the situation as a rapidly deepening regional crisis with growing implications for international shipping and global energy markets. Reuters has also reported that the International Atomic Energy Agency is providing technical support for the UAE after a drone attack affected infrastructure connected to the Barkhah nuclear power plant. Although no radioactive material was released and the facility remained secure, the incident highlighted the growing security challenges facing the country. Meanwhile, Reuters reports that energy shipments through the Strait of Hormuz continue to face disruptions. Oil tankers, LNG carriers, and shipping companies are being forced to adapt to an increasingly uncertain security environment. Every disruption raises concerns about future energy supplies and the stability of global oil prices. Taken together, the message from the world's leading media outlets is clear. The UAE is facing one of the most challenging geopolitical environments in decades. Security risks are rising, energy markets remain on edge, and every major decision made in Abu Dhabi is now being watched by government, investors, and energy trade around the world. So, what happened next if the UAE starts pumping more oil? Now that the UAE is no longer bound by OPEC production quotas, the biggest question is whether Abu Dhabi will actually increase oil output. And if it does, the consequences could be felt far beyond the Middle East. The EU has spent years expanding its production capacity. Today, it has the ability to produce significantly more oil than it was allowed to under OPEC restrictions. ADNOC has already set a target of reaching around 5 million barrels per day by 2027. That means the country has substantial substantial room to increase production in the years ahead. In this scenario, the UAE gradually increases production over the coming months. New barrels enter the market, global supply rises, and oil prices being to face downward pressure. This would be welcomed by oil importing countries. Lower energy costs could help reduce inflation and ease pressure on consumers and businesses around the world, but there is another possibility. If the UAE moves aggressively to gain market share, other major producers may feel forced to respond. Countries such as Saudi Arabia, Iraq, or even no OPEC producer could decide to increase production as well. That could create a new battle for market share inside the global oil market, similar to what happened during previous oil price wars, and that could push prices even lower. However, there is one major obstacle standing in the way: the Strait of Hormuz. As long as security risks remain high and shipping routes face disruption, the UAE's ability to fully capitalize on its additional production capacity remains limited. In other words, producing more oil is one thing, exporting it is another. Many analysts believe the real impact of the UAE's departure may not be visible immediately. The bigger story could emerge once regional tensions begin to ease and once energy exports return to normal. At that point, the UAE would have completely freedom to produce whatever volume it believes serves its national interest, and that could fundamentally change the balance of power in global energy markets. There is also a deeper question: if the UAE succeeds outside OPEC, will other members start asking whether they still need OPEC at all? Because the biggest threat to the organization may not be one country leaving, it may be the possibility that others decide to follow, and if that happens, the future of OPEC could look very different from the one of the world has known for the last 60 years.